afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our work and the lessons that I'm about to share fit quite aptly into this discourse around complementarity, how to strengthen investigations and prosecutions for international crimes with a very specific focus on sexual violence.
Tina, thank you for joining us this afternoon. You've worked to train health professionals, law enforcement personnel, community health workers, to teach them to document sexual and gender-based violence. Amongst those professionals, do you think there is still a social stigma about sexual violence?
Yes, there is still very much a stigma about social violence from the society. However, the value that the trainings bring when we interact with these professionals is that it begins to shift their attitudes from the knowledge and skills that they acquire, particularly feeling empowered that they actually can make a difference, and understanding from a human rights-based approach that survivors do not bring these violations upon themselves, and that when they wear a survivor-centered lens, these attitudes that present stigma to survivors begin to fade away. And over time, we've seen really powerful champions emerge from this pool of clinicians, police officers, legal practitioners, and judges and magistrates that we've been training.
Part of your work also includes the forensic investigation of this crime. What advice do you have to other African countries trying to improve their forensic capabilities when it comes to the investigation of sexual and gender-based violence?
So first and foremost, there has been a misperception that when you talk about forensic evidence, it's synonymous with DNA analysis. That's very far from the truth. In reality, forensic evidence consists of a variety of potential forms of evidence, from physical injuries, bruises, lacerations, burns, the survivor's own story. Interviewing the survivor in a sensitive way produces comprehensive data on the conditions of the violations, the context, and so on, and most importantly, psychological evidence of trauma of those violations. So not to say that DNA analysis is not part of this toolbox of forensic evidence, but it's not the only form of forensic evidence. And I think this is important to underscore when we're talking about low resource settings such as ours, such as many other African countries where we either do not have forensic labs altogether or have very few, as we have in Kenya, only 3. So you can imagine the distance and the feasibility of subjecting numerous forms of evidence to testing becomes that much more challenging. But there's so much more that clinicians and police officers can collect in the form of forensic evidence that is very basic, that can help survivors to be able to access justice much more easily.
And speaking of justice, you've written and spoken about impunity amongst law enforcement officers in the commission of these crimes. What can we do to challenge the situation and ensure that law enforcement are held accountable when they violate the law?
We cannot expect victims who've been raped by police to report to police. As a first measure, that process is set up to fail. Yet we talk about accountability. Yet we have laws. Yet we have police who are mandated to investigate.
I think particularly after the repeat violations in 2017, Kenyan election-related violence, again primarily perpetrated by police officers, it truly is time for us to test command responsibility. The excuse that's been used in past episodes of violence is that the survivors simply say that it was a man in uniform. How do you identify a man in uniform? Well, in reality, international crimes do not necessarily require a direct perpetrator. It could be a perpetrator who's involved in organizing, financing, or has command over the individual who committed the crime. And in this case, some commander was responsible for the battalions that were deployed into these communities. And this time around, we really are very keen on pursuing command responsibility. Why? Because we strongly are convicted of the reality and the fact that without accountability, we cannot begin to prevent these violations. As physicians for human rights, our approach from the intervention by the clinician all the way to the judiciary is really about ensuring a survivor-centered approach that guarantees access to care and treatment, but does not stop there. It actually ensures that we can support the survivor to access justice, thereby preventing the reoccurrence of such violations. So for police, I think that one of the strongest ways we can begin to address this is to pursue accountability. It will be difficult, but I certainly believe very much worthwhile.
Tina, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Angie.